This video is for beginners, those who want to start working with After Effects. Hello everybody, welcome to this video. This is Mehdi from GR Tutorial Studio. In this video, I will be taking you through the basic of Adobe After Effects, and by the end, with the help of what you have learned, you will be able to create your first simple animation in Adobe After Effects. So stick around and let's animating. In this video, I will explain the most basic After Effects tips, commonly used shortcuts, and you will learn how to create animation by keyframes. You can also use the list in the description to watch the video easily. Let me to start the video with the general introduction of the After Effects Workspace. The main panels that you work with it in almost every project. The panels are Project, Timeline, Composition, Effect and Preset, and above is the After Effects toolbar. Of course, there is also the Render Queue panel, which I will explain later. Notice that these are the main and most used After Effects panels. Not all panels in After Effects. Project, Timeline, Composition, Effect and Preset, and Toolbar. In this section, there are other panels such as Preview, Audio, Info, Paragraph, and etc. And each one is for a specific task. We have used some of these panels in other tutorials. From here, you can set your workspace on the other modes. For example, Preview, Learn, a small screen, and etc. Let me set the workspace on the default mode. Now imagine that I want to move the effect and control panel. I just need to click on the 3D line icon and then select the unlock panel. Now, as you can see, the panel is floating in the After Effects workspace. Now we can move it anywhere by clicking and dragging the mouse. If I move it closer to the edge of another panel, you can see that I can snap the panel to this purple section. You can easily customize the workspace. Also, by clicking on the border between two panels and dragging it, can you make the panel larger or smaller. Whenever you want, you can restore the workspace to the previous state. For do this, you should click on 3-line icon and select the Reset to Save Layout option. You can open or close any panel you want through the window menu. There is also a workspace menu here, which you can save your personalized workspace through it. There are also more layouts in this section. Now that you are familiar with the After Effects workspace, it's time to start your project. You need at least one composition to complete each project. You can do this by clicking New Composition. You can also use the shortcut keys Ctrl-N. Note that in After Effects, the shortcut keys for creating a new project are Ctrl-Alt-N, and Ctrl-N will create a new composition for you. Now, in the Composition section panel, do the basic composition settings. First, you must choose a name for your composition. The most important settings of this panel are dimensions and frame rate. We adjust the dimensions with width and height. You can also enable or disable the lock aspect ratio option. If you are not sure that which settings are suitable for your project, you can use Presets menu. I'm using version 23.1.0 of After Effects. As you can see, in this version, there are options for social media in the Preset menu. Another important setting in this panel is for frame rate. You can also choose the background color of your composition. At the end, you can set the duration of your composition. Notice that the order of numbers in timecode is frame, second, minute, and hour. Now, your composition is created and you can see it in Project panel. Its name is also written on the top of the Timeline panel. A practical point that you should know is that you can find Illustrator file and import Photoshop to After Effects. For example, I have an Illustrator file here. I'm going to take it and drag the Project panel. In the Open That window, you must specify how to import the file. In the Import Kind menu, there are two modes, footage and composition. If you choose footage mode, it will merge all the layers of Illustrator file together. I like composition mode. Let me show you. Now you can see that in the project panel, a composition with the same name as Illustrator file has been created for me. One additional thing about composition that I must to tell you is by going to the composition menu and selecting composition settings or using shortcut Ctrl K, you can come back to this panel and edit your composition settings. About the project panel, that any information you want to use in your project must first be entered into the project panel and then use it. For example, now I want to import a few different files into the After Effects. For example, one audio file, one PNG photo, and two MP4 files. I just need to select the files and drag them to the project panel. Now I can drag all of them from the project panel to the timeline panel to enter the composition. Notice that in After Effects, each composition has a timeline. In the timeline, there are two layers above the MP4 file. The third layer is a PNG image of a ball, and at the end, there is the same audio layer. You can zoom in and zoom out in the timeline by using these options. You can move the layers. Any layer that is higher will be played on the top of the other layers. For example, I put this ball image layer on the top of the other layers. You can see it is shown on the movie layer. But these are not all After Effects layers. If you go to the layer menu and new option, you can see all the layers that we can create in After Effects. Some of these layers are related to more professional tutorial that will not talk about it in this video. You can also return to this list by right-click on empty space in timeline panel and selecting new. Now I will make a solid layer. In the solid setting panel, you have to set the layer's name and size. You can also use color picker and choose the color of any part of the scene. As you can see, this solid layer was created for me. In the project panel, all solid layers are collected in the folder with the same name. Let me rename this layer. I can easily do this by right-click. Okay, now let me put the ball layer on the top of the solid layer. Next to the layer name, there is a switch to lock or unlock the layer. You can easily active or deactivate it for each layer. By locking a layer, it's no longer possible to edit or move it. Another type of layer that you can create in After Effects is a text layer. For this, it's enough to select the type tool from the toolbar. By keeping the mouse clicked down, you can see its tools. As you can see, Type tool has two sub-tools, horizontal type tools and vertical type tool. After selecting the tool, just click on the desired point and start typing. In the character panel, you can make settings such as font, size, and style of your text. There is also settings for fill and stroke of your text. Other types of layers in After Effects are shape layers. You can add a shape to your composition with the help of rectangle tool and its sub-tools. You can also adjust the fill and stroke of your shape. If you look carefully, you can see that a new layer called Shape Layer 1 has been created for me on the top of the layer in Timeline panel. In that layer and content section, there is an option called Rectangle 1. Now, while that layer is selected, I will also draw a circle. You can see that Ellipse 1 has been added to the content section. You can also use Pen tool to draw and edit shapes. You can see Shape 1 option in the content section. Because this layer is selected, all shapes will be placed in this layer. If there is no layer selected before drawing the shape, a new shape layer will be created for you. A very important point to know is that if a layer other than shape layer is selected when drawing a shape, you will mask that layer. For example, now I select the solid layer and masked it by drawing a rectangle. Now you can see that there is a mask section for the layer. In this section, you can make mask settings. For example, through this menu, you can control how the mask is applied. Add and subtract mode are the most common modes. These are also a none mode at the top of this menu. Sometimes you may need to use this mode. For example, for the setting of some effects. You can also erase the edges of the mask with the help of mask feather. You can also use mask path to modify the shape of the mask. Another thing you should know is that you can create several masks for one layer and adjust each one separately. As you can see, I create a new mask, and in the mask section, the mask 2 option layer was added below the mask 1 option. Now, let's take a look at the subset of each layer. Next to the name of each layer, there is an arrow icon. If you click on it, the subsection of each layer will be opened there. For example, the text layer has a text section, where some settings for text layer are located in this section. In another video, I have explained to you about this section and the creation of the text effect. There is also a transfer section for the text layer. The photo layer only has the transform section. The solid layer has the mask section that show us the layer masks and their settings, and it also has a transform section. The video layer has an audio section and a transform section. At the bottom, you can see that the sound effect layer, which is basically an audio layer and only has the audio section. As you can see, the transform section is present in all layers except the audio layer. Let me open the transform section of the layers to compare. If you select any panel in After Effects and press tilde key, that panel will be shown to the full screen. We can see better now. As you can see, the transform section has the same options in all layers. Anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity are available for all transform layers. Of course, in the 3D layers, the options of transform section are slightly different, but I do not want to talk about them now. Now, let me explain to you the usage of each of these options, and we will create the first animation that you can create in After Effects. First of all, I must tell you that each of these options in transform section has its own shortcut keys. P key is for position, R key is for rotation, and S key is for scale, T key is for opacity, and A key is for anchor point. The position option has 2 numeric boxes. You can move the layer in the scene with the help of position. To do this, you can click on these number boxes and drag the left or right, or you can type the desired value in the number box. The easier way is to use the Move tool. Just select the Move tool from the toolbar and then click on the desired object in the scene to make the bounding box around it appears. Now, you can easily move the layer in the scene by clicking and dragging. The next option is Scale. With the help of Scale, you can resize the object. Like Position, the Scale option has 2 numeric boxes, and for resizing align the X-axis and the other one for resizing along the Y-axis. If you disable this chain icon, you can individually resize each stretch you want. As you can see, the proportions of object are lost. You can also use Move tool for scale. You can scale the object by clicking and dragging the handle around the bounding box. If you hold down Shift key while using the Move tool, the object will be scaled in the both X and Y direction in the same ratio. The next option is rotation, which I think you can guess what it does. There are two numerical boxes for rotation. If I enter the value 360 in the number box on the right, you can see that it automatically becomes 0 and the number box on the left shows 1. In fact, if you want the object rotate less than 360 degrees, you need to set the number box on the right. And if you want the object to rotate a multiple of 360 degrees, you need to set the number box on the left shows 1 and the number box on the right shows 30. Another way is to use rotation tool or shortcut key Y. You can see that it's very easy to rotate object in the scene. The opacity option also adjusts the opacity of the layer. But finally, let me explain the anchor point option to you. Anchor point also has two numeric boxes to set the coordinates of anchor point relative to the object. This point, which is located in the center of object, is an anchor point. Setting the anchor point is very important because most of transform options are executed based on the anchor point's position. Options such as scale, rotation, or position operate based on the anchor point position. You can use pan behind tool or Y shortcut to set the anchor point. You can see that you can easily move the anchor point in the scene by selecting the pan behind tool. If you hold down Shift key while dragging this, the anchor point will be snapped to the bounding box's edge points. In the other video, I have fully explained to you how to set up anchor point, and I have also introduced a useful script for this. You can also see that video. In the end, I have to tell you, if you click on the word reset here, all the settings you made for the all transform options will be reset. Now it's time to use what you have learned and create your first simple animation in Adobe After Effects. You have learned most of things you need, but I will tell you more practical points and topics. Now let's make your first animation in After Effects. To begin, I click on this option at the bottom of the composition panel and then active the title and action save. The outer box is called action and the inner box is save. These boxes help you to place the component of the scene in the area that will definitely be shown to your viewers. Sometimes, for various reasons, the marginal areas may be affected by the screen or may not be shown completely to your audience. I advise you to put any important image that you want the viewers to see into the action save. I feel that the size of the ball is big, so I scale it down a bit. First, I want to make a simple position animation. So, with the help of Move tool, I place the ball in the scene at its original location. Then, in the timeline panel, next to the position option, I click on the stopwatch icon. As you can see, a keyframe was created for me at the beginning of the timeline. Now, I go forward a little in the timeline and then I change the position of the ball. You can see that another keyframe is automatically created for me in the timeline. Now, if I move between keyframes, you can see that the ball moves from the first point to reach the second point. You can play the timeline by pressing the space. The magic of After Effects is exactly that. You just need to set the primary and secondary position in the scene. Then After Effects find the position of the object in the middle frame by interpolation. Let me zoom in the timeline for a better explanation. Now, by pressing the page down key, I go forward frame by frame in the timeline. You can see that the ball moves a little bit in each frame to reach the second point. Great! Now let me make the third keyframe. For this, I place a timeline marker at the time when I want the keyframe to be created. Another way is to use timecode available at the top of the timeline panel. For example, I enter 4 seconds. After setting the timeline indicator, I change the ball position again. Now, let me set up the work area. I put the timeline indicator at the end of the work area at the time I want. And then it's enough to grab this handle and drag it to the left. You can also use B and N shortcut keys to set the beginning and the end of work area. Now, I want to remove the extra parts of the layers. I move the mouse to the end of the layer until the mouse pointer looks like this two-way arrow. And then it's enough to adjust the length of the layer by clicking and dragging. Of course, if the layer is locked, you have to unlock it first. I use shortcut to set the ball layer length. Shortcut keys Alt and right square bracket set the end of the layer. And the shortcut key Alt and left square bracket set the beginning of the layer. Now, in order to make the ball movement animation a little more natural, we need to create keyframe for scale. So, at the beginning of the timeline, I create a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch icon. Now, I want the second keyframe to be exactly the same as the second position keyframe. For this, you can use the left and right arrows next to the position option. These arrows move the timeline indicator to the previous and the next keyframes. So, after defining the time of the second keyframe, I change the scale value and make it a bit smaller. Now, I want the ball return to its original size after the falling again. So, I copy and paste the first keyframe of the scale very easily. As you can see, the interpolation process is not only for position, but also there is for scale and other After Effects properties. Now it's time to create some keyframe for rotation. I want my ball to spin 1.5 turns during the swing. I think you can guess the process. At the beginning of the timeline, I create a keyframe for rotation and set its value to 0. And then I go to the end of the ball's movement and create the second keyframe in the left box and enter 1. After that, I enter 180 in the right numeric boxes. A good start. I click on this part of work area and select the trim comp to work area option. With this, the duration of composition exactly coincided with the range of my work area. As I told you a little while ago, go back or forward from frame to frame by clicking page down or page up. Well, I don't need the title and action save anymore, so I will disable it. Now let me introduce you to a very useful shortcut key. If you press U key in timeline panel, only the properties to which you made a keyframe will be shown. I would like to tell you a slightly more advanced tip, more professional. In this simple animation that we made, the ball moves very evenly and the speed of keyframe does not change during the movement. You can adjust the speed of keyframes to make the ball moves smoothly. To do this, I select the all keyframes. Right click on one of them and select Easy Ease from the keyframe assistant menu. I could also use F9 shortcut. If you look carefully, you will notice that the shape of keyframe has changed a little. Now I will play the timeline and you will notice differences. There are other modes that you can use to set the keyframe speed or manually set the keyframe speed. To do this, just select the keyframe that you want to adjust the speed and then click on the graph editor at the top of the timeline panel to go to its workspace. Here, in addition to the speed, you can also change the amount of keyframes. But if you want to adjust the speed of keyframes, you should select the edit speed graph option through the menu below. Now, by selecting any of the properties to adjust the speed of its keyframe, the speed chart will be shown to you. This part may seem a bit confusing, but with a little practice you can master in this part. I did not intend to teach this part, and I just want to introduce you to this After Effects feature. You are now familiar with the keyframes and how they work and interpolation, but you should know that keyframes are not only for transform properties, but you can create keyframe for the property anywhere you see a stopwatch icon. You can animate many effects by using keyframes. This panel is the effects panel. As you can see, all of the effects are categorized here. You can also find the effect you want by searching. Now, I want to apply hue and saturation effect on the background layer. I search for it very easily and apply it by clicking and dragging on the layer. Note that if the layer is locked, you need to unlock it first. You can see that after applying the effect on the layer, the effects control panel appears instead of project panel. In this panel, there are all settings and properties of the effects that you can personalize. You can switch between effects control panel and project panel with the help of these flash icons. Let me put it here. If you pay attention to the effects section of the layer, you can see all the same options available in the effects control panel in this section as well. Now, I want to make some keyframes for channel range feature of the hue saturation effect. I start working very easily by clicking on the stopwatch icon. Then I change the value of the master lightness slider in each keyframe. Finally, to render the project, you can use Media Encoder software or render your project in the After Effects. Anyway, you have to go to the composition menu and choose Add to Media Encoder or Add to Render Queue. You can also use Ctrl-Alt-M or Ctrl-M shortcut keys. By choosing Add to Render Queue, the Render Queue panel will appear instead of Timeline panel. If this panel does not open for you, you can activate it through the window menu so that it will be shown to you. In the render queue panel and in the output module section, you can specify the format and codec of the final file. In the video output and channel section, you can choose the channel that you want to render. There are also settings for the final output sound in the audio output section. We suggest you leave it on the auto mode if you are not professional in this field. Then, in the output to section, you specify the address and the name for storing the final output file. At the end, you need to click on the render button. Welcome to the wonderful world of Adobe After Effects. After Effects is vast, but now you know its most used things. At the end, don't forget that more you learn, better you will do. So long.